Hey everyone, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I'm your host, G1. As always, I hope you're having a good week. It has been a busy one for me as we close into the holidays, getting things all lined up for family and, what the plans for meals and visits and, all that stuff that you do this time of year. I'm really looking forward to this season this year. Last year, after being laid off from my job, it was kind of bleak, and it kind of overshadowed everything that was going on. So it didn't really have much in the way of enjoyment in it. Considering what it is. This year, things are much better with my situation, although I'm still, not back work full time, but enough about my state of things. Things are much better than they were last year. Let's just put it that way. Let's get down to some business. What are we talking about today? Well, it's a mixed bag. I hate to be such a downer here, honestly. I do. And I've said that many times on the show. If I bring you doomer material, doomer news, doomer views, I try to at least close with an uplifting moment so that I don't leave you crushed. But that is harder and harder to do these days because we just don't seem to be getting a lot of good news and happenings. And I guess that's just a sign of the times and sign of things to come. Maybe this is how you know that the thing that you've been fearing and dreading for so long is finally getting rolling and finally happening. I don't know. I hope that's not the case. I hope that we're just kind of in a trough and, we'll get an upswing coming soon and things will start looking better. Let's kick things off with the end of the shutdown. I guess for some folks this could be good news. Trump signed the documents that came over from Congress. I don't know if that's technically a law or a resolution. I'm not exactly sure how the legislation is termed there, but he signed it to a continuing resolution to open the government back up, at least for another few months, because my understanding is this only goes through like sometime the first of the year. Didn't delve too deeply into that, so apologies if I'm stating something incorrect there. But so the shutdown is over. That's a good thing, I guess. Perhaps there will be some progression of legislation and efforts now. I don't know. I don't really believe that. It's just speculation at this point. We have what is a collection of the executive branch, the agencies, the departments with Trump at the top. And that group is at war with the judicial branch, which we'll get into shortly, and also at war with itself, as the heads of these agencies and departments have seemingly little control over what the low-level managers and, ground floor employees are actually doing. The legislative branch is pretty much irrelevant. Nobody really listens to them. They don't do anything. They just spew and get on TV and kind of bicker, but nothing comes out of them. They're irrelevant. And I've never felt so much contempt for our government at all levels and all branches than I do right now. And I really hate to say that because I felt like we might actually get something done when Trump was coming into office, Trump 2.0. I thought, he's got nothing to lose here. He can go in there. He can do what needs to be done. If he gets things right, if he gets the right people, all bets are off. There's so much work to be done. There's so much cleanup that needs to happen, so many changes, and it was a daunting task. I didn't really have a lot of confidence that he was going to accomplish all of those things, but I thought for sure that we would get something done. And it looked like that at the beginning of the administration, but something happened around April, I guess, is when people are kind of pointing to, and it all went to shit after that. We've gotten more entrenchment from the establishment and more bad advice given to Trump by the establishment, and he is at least speaking in terms that indicate that he might be following that really bad advice. And he is in a lot of ways. He's certainly done some things that are very questionable and go against what he promised going into office, which is not to be unexpected from a politician. But at any rate, the thing you have to do with Trump is you have to listen to only about 20% of what he's saying and just ignore the rest of it, because he will go public and roll out something like this 50-year mortgage thing that came out this week. It's just something that he's heard from some of his advisors. And when that gets absolutely roasted in public, well, he won't actually do that. Won't actually do anything like that. He just seems to test these things out on the, but on the back end, nothing is really happening. It doesn't. Nothing actually takes place along those lines. But that's a problem, in my opinion. I suspect it represents a conflict inside of his circle, and he's using the public to kind of settle these arguments or these propositions that are put up in front of him. One person says we should do this, and one person says, and he goes out and and then he goes out in public and he tests these ideas out, and people are like, no, that's dumb, let's not do that. Which, in some ways you could look at that and go, well, at least he's kind of floating these things out there, but it just looks so bad. It's terrible. It looks like this administration is completely out of touch with people, the very people who put you into office again. And case in point, the H-1B visa program. Again, Trump has an interview and he says, I agree that we have to prevent millions of people coming here fraudulently or, at the low end of jobs on these H-1B visa programs, which is great. But then he adds that, well, we don't have all the talent that we need in the U.S., so we've got to bring some people here. That is just... It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's so terrible. The messaging there, the wording there is just so wrong. You're wrong, Mr. President. You're wrong. Yes, on a small case-by-case basis, you can go out there and say, well, yeah, we need some folks temporarily for a small group of people to come here from certain company to this company here and train them to be specialists on maybe new equipment or procedures or something like that. That's a thing. That's a thing. Okay, and it may be that it's something that takes longer than 2 or 3 weeks to do. I go back to my previous job. We had a piece of equipment, big piece of equipment, specialized equipment, printing press. Was manufactured in Denmark. Nobody here in the United States knew how to put that thing together. They sent a crew of Danish guys here to build that machine and assemble it. Everything came over in containers. It was put together on the shop floor out there. Big press thing. Those guys were there for about 6 or 8 weeks because this was a massive industrial printing press. Was not something that you just slam together over a weekend, shut the plant down and throw this thing in there. No, this was a huge press that was probably 150 foot long the way this machine ran. Those are specialist people that have to come here to do that. I totally understand that case being made. Those guys aren't here on an H-1B visa. They're coming in here on a temporary work permit or something like that. That's not what H-1B is being used for. It's being used to absolutely gut the tech industry and destroy white-collar jobs that middle-class people have been doing. I'm living through the results of these policies and decisions by corporations. This has got to stop. And plenty of people are pushing back on this. You can get Congress to carve out a new visa program for temporary trainers or something like that. If there isn't one already there, I suspect there is one already there. But this pipeline to chain migration and wealth destruction, it's got to stop. It's got to be ended. I don't know really what Trump thinks about this topic because he's articulated several positions that do have an overlap if you kind of parse through the corporate speak but it's still leaving a lot open to interpretations at the lower levels, and that's a problem. That's not clear and concise messaging. And I'm optimistic that the public pushback that is coming from this will maybe prompt the administration to kind of get out and actually speak on this matter in more clear policy defining language. But we shall see. We shall see. It's not looking good right now. In other news, which I think bears deeper attention and kind of really more of the focus of the show, this is something that I think needs to be talked about a little bit more in the right-wing blogosphere. Let's go back to Chicago and the ICE arrest. If you watch a lot of the videos from the people obstructing ICE coming out of Chicago, one of the things that you will hear increasingly, at least in those particular Chicago videos, is the protesters screaming, "Where's your warrant? You have to have a warrant to arrest them." Well, I've been quite puzzled by that. Why do they keep screaming this? That is not how arrests work. Okay, they're what are they doing screaming this to ICE? That ICE just ignores them and just goes on about their business. Well, it turns out this week a low-level federal judge has issued yet another royal decree that ICE has to release all of these people that they have arrested in sort of groups. There's a small group at first, and then there's another group that's supposed to be released, and more potentially down the way. But they're going to have to release all of these people because the arrest violated something called the Castellón-Nava consent decree. And I'm butchering that. It's something in Spanish. It's some guy's name that's sued, involved in a lawsuit. But it's a consent decree. And it was the first that I'd heard of this. I'm like, what is this? Where did this come from? Well, great minds being in sync, Concerned American, over on the big website, posted a piece with commentary on this decree and offering a flawless case, in my opinion, for the Trump DOJ to vacate this decree. And that needs to be done quickly, by the way, or else as you watch or hear this program, hundreds of illegals are going to be turned back onto the streets in Chicago. So what is this lawfare pile of dog shit, this consent decree? Well, back during the Biden administration, a group of so-called civil rights organizations on behalf of illegals already in the country sued the Department of Homeland Security. And the Biden DOJ rolled over and decided, well, we're just not going to fight this lawsuit in court. And they agreed to this settlement. And the judge in this case took the settlement and transformed it into a multi-state consent agreement that the Biden Department of Homeland Security promptly enforced on a national level. And this agreement completely ties the hands of ICE if they follow it to the letter. They're essentially not allowed to arrest people. It says that if ICE rolls up on a job site, as an example, let's say they've received a call that the site employs, a ton of illegals, the whole workforce is illegal at this site. They don't know who's at the job site. Currently what they do is they get an administrative warrant with no specific names on it, and they go there and they detain everybody. They ask them for documentation. They ascertain who is legal and who is illegal. And if you're illegal, you get arrested and you go through the deportation process. This consent decree says, no, you can't do that anymore. ICE has to get a warrant for a specific illegal alien by name. If they arrive on the job site with that warrant for that particular person and they discover that, well, there's 50 other illegals here, they can't arrest them. You can't arrest bystanders. They have to get warrants for each one of those bystanders by name. And in order to get the warrant, they have to articulate that this illegal is likely to flee the country and not be around for a deportation hearing. And they have to do a very lengthy investigation to prove that they, have no ties to the community or whatnot, that they're not going to stick around and show up for their deportation hearings. And the Biden administration was using this, and then, they were forcing these guys to schedule these deportation hearings 10 years down the road. It was a way to circumvent the process. It ties the hands of ICE, and it inserts a different process that is outside of the normal, arrest situation for everyone else in the country. If you or I commit a crime that's in the witness of a police officer, or if they suspect that you've committed a crime, they don't need a warrant to arrest you right there on the spot. You get arrested. You go to jail for a bit, and then you go see a judge who says, yeah, I see enough evidence here to hold you, or no, this looks to me like we can release you on bail, or even I can release you on your own recognizance, that your word that you're going to show up for your court date. That's a process that the rest of us have to go through. They need a warrant to go search, or if they're, hey, we can't find this person, we're going to put the warrant out there. If you find this person, pick them up, that kind of thing. ICE pulling up to a job site and asking for IDs and determining that a person is illegal is sufficient evidence to arrest them and deport them. And the person can get a lawyer and contest that deportation procedure, but they most certainly need to be taken in so that they can be deported at the time of review. So why would this agreement be in place? Well, this is a setup from the very start. The Biden DOJ had no intention of fighting this, and they willingly agreed to it. And they had an activist judge that rubber stamped it to make it extremely difficult for the following administration to unwind. They knew this going in, and that was the intention. The process that they took here overrides congressional authority, and it supersedes a new administration coming in that has different policies, changes to policies that people voted for. So this is going to be a big issue for the administration if they do not simply vacate this agreement. This needs to be stamped out as soon as possible. There's no legal basis for this. Congress, in fact, has specifically passed provisions that prohibit lower court judges from ruling on these wide-ranging class actions type lawsuits, whole classes of illegals or whatever. Congress says, no, you can't do that. You don't get to make those decisions. So this should have never been put into place. Now, the optimist in me says that the administration was well aware of this decree, but they would have known this was going on. And that is why that they've put so much focus on Chicago. Chicago kind of came out of nowhere in terms of ICE enforcement. There's a heavy crime situation in Chicago, but that's primarily, gang violence and things like that. And Trump made the case that, well, this is in large part or significantly contributed to by illegals, so that's why we're sending ICE to Chicago. But that's not really the case. I think that this was on the radar of the administration when they focused on Chicago. And I suspect that some of these moves have been done in order to get these debates out there in the courts and get these decisions that are ahead of maybe a far more wide-ranging action that's going to be taken down the road. Now, again, that's the optimist in me. The jaded old cynic in me says that shit ain't happening, and this is going to be yet another, throwing up of the hands and a shrug of the shoulders with oh, shucks, guys, we got outsmarted by those Democrats again. Gosh darn it. Yeah. I'm leaning optimist right now just because of the actions of some of these higher courts. They seem to be, every time one of these things gets into a court, you see these injunctions, and then it goes up the chain, and the higher courts are like, yeah, no, we can't. Your injunction isn't going to work. No, the administration has the power to do this. So I'm leaning optimist right now, but I don't have my hopes pinned on that. Anyway, on a final note, stepping away from the political world for a minute to say a few words about an amazing man, an amazing actor. The film world lost a powerful force this week. Tatsuya Nakadai, a man who was not well known in Western media, but was a major player in Japanese cinema for decades. He was probably the best actor to ever come out of Japan. Not the most well known, but in terms of his range and ability, he was unmatched. Toshiro Mifune is the actor who is probably the most well known from samurai movies, and he is a force. He is a powerful actor. He is the man that I call the Japanese John Wayne, but that is because, like Wayne, he always was himself on screen. He projected his persona into the character and made it him, really. Nakadai had a much broader range, and he was just as much of a presence on screen as Mifune. I've talked about probably his most well-known film in the West, Ran, on the show before. Go back and watch that episode where I talk about it. But he was a major force in cinema, in Japanese cinema. He passed away this week at the age of 92. Now that is all I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Mothership. And I'll see you on the next episode.